Hey everybody, it's Mike from the Mike Wagner Show, powered by Sonic Web Studios and brought to you by official sponsor of the Mike Wagner Show, international warring author Mia Molson's The Missing, available on Amazon and paperback and ebook. We're here with a terrific lady who's an author with a cherished medical career, currently in Westchester County, New York, and grew up in the 60s watching Holocaust documentaries as a normal family activity until elementary school, and also used notes compiled by her father. Retelling the poignant account, telling deeply personal story, which is her dad, Jack Wolf Schwarzenz, and of the nail-biting escape from Germany and last-minute rescues and near-death encounters and survival against all odds. And basically, it's the book called American Wolf: From Nazi Refugee to American Spy. And how do we get to that point? Live, ladies and gentlemen, plus dues in beautiful downtown New York City, the author with a cherished medical career, currently in Westchester, New York City, with the amazing book American Wolf: From Nazi Refugee to American Spy. Ladies and gentlemen, the multi-talented Audrey Birnbaum. Audrey, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks so much for having me, Mike. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, it's great to have you on board, Audrey. So you're an author with a cherished medical career, currently in Westchester County, New York, and you grew up in the 60s watching Holocaust documentaries as a normal family activity until elementary school. And you also used notes compiled by your late father retelling the poignant account story. Your dad is Jack Wolf Schwarzenz, to tell a deeply personal story of the nail-biting escapes from Germany, last-minute rescues, near-death encounters, and survival against all odds. And of course, your book is called American Wolf: From Nazi Refugee to American Spy. And how do we get to that point and more about it? Tell us how you first got started, Audrey.
Yeah, so it really started with my dad's death, which is I know a very happy tale to tell, but actually today is 6 years to the date of my father passing away in 2018. And I can now tell it without, crying because, time heals.
Mm-hmm.
But and that 2018 was a really bad year for me. I was still working as a physician, and I had taken a vacation and had a really bad ski accident. I came home with
Ooh.
a terrible broken leg, and my family literally had to carry me up this 21 stairs to my house. I
Oh
had
my goodness. Oh,
surgery.
that's a chore
Uh,
itself.
it was, then I got told like after surgery that I couldn't work for 2 months, which is the first time in my life I'd never worked before. And then a week later, my father passed away, and so I was on crutches, and I'm like, I have to do a eulogy, and I'm like, my sister and I talked about it. And we're like, yeah, we got to tell the story about, dad and his escape from, the Holocaust. It was such an important part of his life. And we're like, of course we know this. We've heard about this since we were born. We like lived with it growing up. I mean, some people, when their parents are in the, survivors of the Holocaust, their family doesn't talk about it. But my father was a talker, and we kind of lived through it. We're like, yeah. And my sister was like, yeah, he took the boat out of Portugal. And I'm like, no, he took the boat out of Spain. And we're looking at each other. We're like, how do we not know the details? And we realized, well, we talked about it when we were kids, but then there was a time where we just stopped talking about it because it's sort of assumed, well, you know it already. You stopped
Mhm.
telling the stories. And then I remembered that my father had written everything down. And when he retired, which was maybe 10 years before he passed away, 10 or 12 years before he passed away, he spent months typing everything he could remember. And he did that. I found out actually just recently. He did that because he had been diagnosed with prostate cancer, and he thought he was going to die, and he
Mhm.
didn't, thank goodness. But he thought, I got to write down everything for my kids, for my grandchildren. And he sat down at his typewriter with two fingers. He sat down and typed his whole life story in unbelievable detail. I would have to say too much detail if you want to stop.
but
Because at the
that's a good
time,
thing. Makes a great book
yeah,
though. So
well, it gave me great material, but at the time, I remember reading it. At the time, I was busy. I have three kids, and I was working full time, and I started reading it, and it was like, okay, and you have 16 cousins and 23 great grandparents, and I'm looking at him like, oh my God, this is like kind of dry and kind of dull, and I was like, yeah, 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 okay, and I put it away, and I put it in my attic. So then, fast forward to my dad being now deceased, and I'm legless, and I like dragged myself up into my attic and found the thing that I hadn't really read, and dusted it off and found what I needed for the eulogy. And then I looked at it and looked through it, and I'm now in bed rest for a couple of months, and I'm reading it. And I get to the part about his escape story. I mean, there was more in it, you know, all the jobs he had and all this like stuff that I thought was not that interesting. But the part about growing up in Germany and escaping in 1941, already 2 years into the war, bombs falling on his apartment building, and having tried for almost 5 years to get a visa to the United States, and then ending up on what ended up to be the last ship that left Europe to come to America. It was a story. It was a riveting story where I kept saying, I don't know if he's going to make it out. And then, of course, I'm like, no, I guess I'm alive. So I guess he did make it. But it felt like I was on the edge of my seat the whole time. And, you know, I read it through. I was still working, and I would work till 2020. And then my mother kept saying, you know, Dad really wanted to have that published. And I was like, you know, the way it was written, the way he wrote it was a great testimony, but it wasn't a readable book. And
Mhm.
I thought, I had at that in 2020, I stopped working, and I thought, I think I can do this. Well, I don't know if I could do it, but I'm going to give it a shot. I'm going to try and see if I can make it a book that everybody wants to read and everybody could relate to.
Hmm.
And so, and that's what I did.
That is rather interesting. And of course, you know, the intricate stories about last minute rescues, near death experience, and everything. I love the part you talk about how your dad got on the board at the last minute. Maybe if you can recall or describe, you know, how did he get on board like at the last minute? It's like, you know, trying to run and like, you know, I can imagine jumping on the ship last minute. It's like, wait, 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 and all that. So
Yeah,
this
you know,
sounds like a really interesting story. How he got on, like, you know, skin of the by a hair, skin of the teeth, last split second, everything like that.
I know you have this picture probably of him like jumping onto the boat as it's leaving. It wasn't quite like that. I mean, you know, it wasn't like a Mission Impossible scene. But I think the thing was that my family had been a little late to apply for visas. They were in Germany, and they were in Berlin, and in a way, Berlin seemed like a safe place to be because from the outskirts of Germany, it was much worse. People, they had their homes taken from them, or they were being sent east to ghettos. And so anyone who could was going to Berlin because it seemed safer. There was a bigger Jewish population. There was, you know, for a little while, my father was able to go to a Jewish school, even though he wasn't allowed to go to public school. And they were lulled a little bit into some complacency that maybe things would blow over. But by 1937, they applied for a visa, and they kept being deterred and deterred and deterred. And my father never knew until he died that these deterrences were not accidental, they were intentional. The US was complicit. The head of the State Department here in the US was told to do everything. He told all of the embassies to postpone and postpone and postpone in a written letter, it's in writing, everything you can do to make sure that people don't get their documents. And so
Really?
even though they had, yes, so even though they had a sponsor in the United States who could sponsor them and who had the finances to do it, it was a first cousin who owned a shoe store here, and he had the means. First, they were told, well, you're German, but we're going to put you on a Polish visa, which made it much harder for them to get in. And
Oh,
that had to
really?
do with my grandparents, where they were from Prussia originally, which was part of Germany, but it ended up getting, due to the First World War and the Treaty of Versailles, it ended up getting the borders got changed, and it got considered part of Poland. And then they said, you know, you have a health problem. Grandpa has a hernia, and that's got to be fixed, you know, and go find a doctor in the middle of a war, you know. And then they said, oh, you know what? We're going to give you 3 visas, not 4, even though you're a family of 4. And they had to figure out what we're going to do with one of their family members. And then the final thing was, we lost all your paperwork. You're going to have
Oh
to get
my
all your paperwork
goodness.
again.
You sure
And
it wasn't
so
propaganda?
this is actually, there was a documentary on PBS, the US and the Holocaust, and this is how I found out actually about it. I had already written the book, and I'm watching this and I'm like, oh, this wasn't an accident. My dad wrote, you know, this, we had such bad luck and it was terrible and it took so long. And I'm like, no, this is now public record. Breckinridge Long, the head of the State Department, he said postpone and postpone and postpone. It's in writing. And so they were doing this intentionally because they didn't really want the refugees to come. I mean, internationally, nobody really wanted, no one, it
Mhm.
was Hitler's big joke. He was like, we don't want the Jews, but nobody else does either. So this was, real intentional. So in the end, they managed to get their 3 visas. They decided my father's sister would go to England. Um, the English had made some kind of a plan to offer jobs as domestics to so when she was 17, she went off on her own, and the rest of my father was much younger. He was 11, and they said, okay, and so it's 1941, and the problem was the war, and you had to leave from a neutral country, and there weren't any neutral countries left. So they originally had a plan to go to China, and they were going to leave from Italy in 1940, and they had a visa and everything actually to China. But then Italy entered the war in June, and they were supposed to leave in June, and their plans got dashed basically. So then they were waiting and waiting and waiting for the U.S. visa, but you had to get all of this paperwork. It was a bureaucratic nightmare to get an exit visa from Germany, to get a visa to go into Spain, because you could, as a Jew, you couldn't stay in Spain, so you could only get like a 2-week transit visa. Then you couldn't board a ship unless you had your visa to America. And if your visa wasn't good, they wouldn't let you board. So they were on their way, and they made it to Spain, and they got to Barcelona. They were ready to board their ship, but the boat was delayed by a day, and their US visa expired,
Ooh.
and they weren't allowed to board the ship that they had a ticket for. And so
Mhm.
there they were in Spain with only days left before being kicked out of Spain without a ship. And
Oh
so they
my.
went on a mad dash to try to find another ship and to try to get a visa extension. And in Barcelona, they didn't even have an embassy. So they had to scramble to try to find something. So they went to Madrid, and then they went to Seville, and then they found an embassy, and a wonderful man there said, I'm going to try and help you. I'm going to write to the State Department. We'll try and get you another visa. We'll try and find a ship. And they found a ship. It was a freight ship that was full of, really looked like a concentration camp. They called it actually a floating concentration camp.
Hmm.
Couldn't get a visa. And they tried and tried, and they couldn't get a visa. And um, they somehow managed to board. And I'm not going to give away what happened, because for that, you're gonna have to read the book.
Right. Yeah, it's almost like a Mission Impossible. There was one question I had that
Yeah.
that the U.S. not allowed to let in refugees. Were they complying with what was going on in Germany, or was it like a UN international law, or was it the president that had to comply, or was it his choice to comply with it?
It was, I mean, Spain was complying with US law, that we will not put you on the ship unless you have a valid visa for the US. That's how that was working. And so Spain was, they were not allowed to put you on a ship to the US, because you would get there not allowed to be there. It would be like you were stowaway. So Spain was being in compliance with US law. And so they had, it was very tricky anyway. Like, they had a visa, and it was going to expire the day they were going to arrive, so they had cut it really close. But that's the best they could do, because how many ships were there that were heading out at that point? It was really just a few freight ships that they were piling like 1,200 people on board for
Wow.
ships that were made for like 20 passengers. And they were just, this was desperate times. This was really like, this was the end. There was, these were the last ships out. So, so that's really the first half of the book is really about, this sort of like riveting, how did they live through the war? How did they get out? And then there's the transit itself, which is, like, I don't think people have written much about the transits, across the water. But then the rest of the book is how it was, what happened when he got here, because it wasn't loving arms. It was, it's funny because he was rejected in Germany, for being a Jew. Like, you're scum, you're cockroach, you're parasite.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, right. You're like,
Exactly. It's almost like what's happening here, somewhere along those lines, but maybe like, a bit nastier. I know what you mean though.
and then, right. So then he comes here, and they're like, you're thinking like, oh God, we made it. And then you're like, oh, guess what? There's anti-Semitism here too, and worse, there's because we're at war with Germany, so nobody likes the Germans. And
Mhm.
then the Eastern European Jews didn't like the German Jews because they were like, oh, the German Jews are snobs because they have a superiority complex, which was true. I mean, it was legitimate. And so he's like, oh, well, I guess it's not good to be German. I guess it's not good to be Jewish. I guess I'll try to become an American as quickly as I can. But you know what? You can't shed your origins that quickly, and you can't really fit in when you're an immigrant. And I think that, his struggle to try to be successful and become an American, well, his parents really couldn't. They, middle-aged people, they don't learn the language, and they came in poverty. They had $10 and two
Wow.
suitcases because that's all they were allowed to. I mean, there was a plan in Germany to uh, to take assets of the Jews and to make sure they left in poverty. They was allowed $10 each, one suitcase each, and that's that. And so they came in poverty, and they worked their tails off to try to make it. And psychologically, my grandfather, who had been the happiest, funniest, most delightful man, as most of my very stern grandmother, who had, she had a good work ethic, but she was a tough cookie. But my grandfather, who was very just a boisterous person, he perhaps was not um, as didn't maybe he didn't really have the psychological makeup to be able to push through the disappointment. There's something when you're trying to save yourself that keeps you going,
Mhm.
and then you get here. And I think sometimes, and I've read this about people who've been in concentration camps too, that the depression comes after, because you have hope. We will make it. We will survive. And then you get here, and then what you're left with, the reality, can be uh, very sad when you realize, that you have to start over. And so my grandfather really did not fare well. And my father felt like the weight of the world was on his shoulders to lift the family out of poverty and try to, they all worked menial jobs, whatever, making hairnets or working, sweatshop. And my father's, working two jobs while he's trying to go to school. And he was left back 2 years, and, because he didn't know English and he hadn't been in school for a year and a half in Germany. Because by the time the war hit, all the schools just closed down. They didn't even have fuel to heat the schools.
Mhm.
So he felt like, this weight of becoming the man of the house. And it was always like, two steps forward, one step back. And
Right.
they managed to they managed to build up a little bit of a nest egg, and then for reasons that I also don't want to say because it's in the book, they lost it all again.
Mhm.
And um and so it was a real struggle, and for him to find his way.
Mhm.
And I chose to end the book with he becomes a soldier right after the Korean War, and um, goes back to Germany. And I thought that was like a nice, bookend to, go back to the country he was homesick for. Yet
Mhm.
that's where his enemies were too.
Mhm. Right. And of course,
Yeah.
the thing I was more thinking about going back to Germany. Do you, do you- according to his account, do you think that Germany has improved? Did it stay the same, or did it get worse?
So we actually, we all have been to Germany multiple times. And interestingly, my sister and I and all of our kids have German citizenship. It's part of, German policy to restore citizenship of people who would, where citizenship was all taken away. They took Jewish citizenship away after like the Nuremberg laws. Um, but Germany has been really, really good about educating truthfully, it's complicity and without blame, but realistic education to try to prevent something like this from happening again.
Mhm.
But when my father went back, Germany was still, and this was early 1950s, like 1954, and we were in the height of the Cold War, and he was stationed in East Germany in Potsdam, because he had the linguistic skills. They thought he would be a great intelligence officer, and the U.S. was really, really worried about Russia because in the Korean War, they realized that Russia had advanced equipment. They had tanks that were more sophisticated than ours, and they're like, we better start ramping up our spying because we, we're behind the 8 ball. And so my father did some serious spying in East Germany, and spied on Russian troops and military activities, and it was his heyday. Who doesn't want to be a James Bond in 1954? So
or
he
having a
thought he
martini
was.
shaken, not stirred. You know what I'm saying?
He
So
was like, it was probably like the coolest he ever was or ever will be in the 1950s. And, he was full of gadgetry and he drove like a spy. But Berlin was in rubble. It was still in rubble. It had not been rebuilt yet. And it was just still in ruins. But I think he was homesick and really wanted to go back because it still felt like home. And in a way, America, he loved being an American and he was very proud to be an American soldier. But there was this feeling that he was always a foreigner here in the US. And so he went back. And then as soon as he stepped foot on German soil and he saw his first German person, he thought, oh, shoot, what if this guy's a Nazi? Like, it didn't occur to him that these people had been his enemies because he left as a child. So that thought that these people could look at him and be anti-Semitic had just not occurred to him until he stepped foot on land. And then he felt like his American uniform was his armor, that being a soldier protected him against all that anti-Semitism that he faced when he was young. And that pride that he had as a soldier made him feel safe. And then eventually, after being there like 6 weeks or so, that feeling that everyone might be looking at him with an anti-Semitic glance went away, and he saw the German people as just people again. It just took him a while for that paranoia to ease up.
Mhm. And of course, you also had your accounts as well, too. Watching PBS documentaries as normal activities until elementary school, and what happened there. We'll find with Audrey Birnbaum in the book "American Wolf: From Nazi Refugee to American Spy." But first, listen to the Mike Wagner Show at the MikeWagnerShow.com, powered by Sonic Web Studios. Visit online at SonicWebStudios.com for all your needs. Looking at a professional website without breaking your budget? Sonic Web Studios is the answer. Sonic Web Studios offers fast, affordable custom web designs that blow the competition away. Call today, 1-800-303-3960. It's 1-800-303-3960, or email to support@sonicwebstudios.com. Mention the Mike Wagner Show, get 20% off your first project. Sonic Web Studios, take your image to the next level. Also, time to give official shout out to our official sponsor of the Mike Wagner Show, international warring author Mia Molson-Zia. If you love fast-paced mysteries, you'll love Missing by Mia Molson-Zia, available on Amazon in paperback and ebook. Missing is fast-paced and intriguing with an unforgettable twist. Takes place in 4 countries, 2 strangers, 1 target, where truth is illusion and those who love will be the first to go missing. It's available on Amazon in paperback and ebook. Missing by Mia Molson-Zia has garnered great reviews. And Eve 11 endorsed by Howard celebrities, including Joanna Cassidy, Forbes Riley, and Manils. So grab your copy today for Girls Missing by Mia Molson-Zia, available on Amazon. Also, check out the Mike Wagner Show at the MikeWagnerShow.com and our 40 podcast platforms. Heard in 100 countries, including Facebook, SoundCloud, Spreaker, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Apple Music, Odyssey, BitChute, Rumble. Make sure you subscribe. Also on YouTube, also on Podbean, Buzzsprout, Pandora, and TuneIn as well, too. And follow on Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, TikTok, Facebook, and more. Make sure you take us with you on any mobile device. And for great gift ideas, go to Amazon.com. Check out the Mike Wagner Show podcast. T-shirts, pop sockets, throw pillows, tote bags, hoodies, makes great gifts 24/7 and year round. Go to Amazon.com. Check out the Mike Wagner Show podcast And for more great gift ideas, go to amazon.com/Mia Molson for great books like Missing, Once, and Wrinkles, plus t-shirts, pop sockets, hoodies, phone cases, and more. Amazon.com/Mia Molson. Check it out today. And support the Mike Wagner Show on Anchor FM, PayPal, and the MikeWagnerShow.com. We're here with the author with a cherished medical career currently in New York City, Audrey Birnbaum, here on the Mike Wagner Show with American Wolf, from Nazi Refugee to American Spy. And we covered a book from your father's perspective, and with you growing up as well, watching documentaries on PBS's Normal Activity. And you go to elementary school, it's a totally different world. You talk about PBS, they're eating PBJs, and instead of PBS, they're talking about the Brady Bunch. I mean, that's a big shock.
Yeah, we didn't really have, I have to say, like we did not have a normal American childhood. My mother was American, but we grew up with this shroud of my father's experience. And my father, like he did experience great joy, and he loved, he loved music and art, and he could be very playful, but he definitely suffered from severe anxiety, which of course as a child we didn't know it was anxiety. We just didn't understand why my father was so explosive, like why he got angry all the time, why he yelled at the drop of a hat at us, at my mother, why there were so many things we couldn't do, why he was afraid to spend money, and why we worked all the time, was work, 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 work. And only later did I understand what, when you live through all the losses he lived through, lost family members, he lost friends, they lost all their money, they lost it all again. They've always felt like they were running, that, anything could happen anytime. You could, you might have to leave your country. You might have to, who knows that, he internalized that, tremendously. And I think just that fear, became part of his DNA. And I have to say, a little bit became ours too.
Mhm.
Um, you know, except that he didn't get therapy for that. And
Right. Yeah.
my
Mhm.
sister now did. So we're working through it.
And of course, I
So
thought
yeah.
about now you guys now the family just got away from Germany and landed in New York. Now, did they stay in New York throughout the whole lives, or did they like go out east, like say Boston or Philadelphia, or even headed further, like say go out to Cleveland, Chicago, or Milwaukee, Cincinnati, or make a dare some went out to Los Angeles or Denver, Dallas, or Miami?
Or the least daring people, part of the fear factors, the fear of leaving anywhere. My father made it from Washington Heights to Flushing, Queens. My mother still lives in the same apartment in Flushing, Queens. My father would not allow me or my sister to go away to college. So we both, I mean, she went to Barnard, and I was in a 6-year medical program that ended up at NYU. Um, and we all were New Yorkers. My sister now lives in Boston, but this idea of keeping everybody so close, this sort of fear of losing people was huge. And that, I think, again, this is absolutely related to his war experiences. So yes, I mean, even though he wasn't in a concentration camp, um, I mean, without doubt, there was this chronic fear that you could not go far. The family has to stay together no matter what. So yeah, that's the legacy. So yeah, we could have gone anywhere, but we didn't.
Hmm.
And it was by, whether it was conscious or not, I mean, I don't know, but without doubt.
Hmm.
But I let my kids go.
And of course, you went on to become a nice medical career in New York as well, too.
I did. I did. I was, again, my parents never said like become a doctor or anything, but I think, we understood what they did say. So my sister, my sister and I are both very musical, and my sister went to music and art high school, and they did say to her, don't become a musician. So like there was an understanding that,
It's
they're
because
like, she's like, I think I'll major in music. They said, well, you can major in music, but we won't pay for college if you do that. So I mean, the messages get sent, one way or another, that, you're going to do something that's, will land you at least some kind of a steady career of some kind. And I loved, I enjoyed medicine, and I started very young. I graduated medical school when I was 22.
Wow.
So by the time I was, by 2020, I had been practicing for over 35 years. And I was like, I think I'm ready to do something else. But it's not like I said, oh, I think I'll become an author. I mean, it was really like I just wanted this story to be told in a way that people could really relate to. It's, in a fast-paced, emotional story. But now that I believe I can write a book, now there's no stopping me. So
Hmm. You talked you talked about your dad, a love for music and art and everything. What are some of his favorite music and some of his favorite groups that he enjoyed listening to or singers?
no, I think he was much more like a classical music person. So I mean, he loved like Mahler and Beethoven. That was really his thing. He wasn't. I don't think he really liked. I can't recall him listening to popular music. It was almost always something symphonic. He loved going to museums, and when we traveled, we went a lot. Loved traveling, and it was a very adventurous traveler. He went with my mother to South America and Asia, and they never went on a tour. They always like planned the trips out themselves. And
Mm.
when we would go to Europe, he would, visit every museum, every church. And when I say every, again, there's a compulsive quality to it. It's like every church. We have to go to every church. We have to go to every museum. You know,
and,
there's like because
and just pray, pray, pray. Go, where are we going next? Where are we
everyone.
going next? No need
You
for
are
the
well
Pope on that one.
educated. No, we were very exposed to things that were deemed educational. So, and maybe it wasn't that much fun. Like I said, my friends would go to Disney. We went to Europe, and maybe going to the Louvre is not that much fun for an 8-year-old, but well, that's what we did.
Mm.
Uh, yeah.
That was rather fascinating too. And of course, I think you're just, just going through a book and everything, maybe just, one more story of survival escape. And of course, yeah, like these, last minute nail biters and everything. And maybe, they're just a little fun story about, maybe just have a little fun on a ship or something like that. Or maybe just one side story that nobody really knows about, light side.
Yeah, I think I will tell the story actually about my aunt. I wouldn't call this a nail biter, but I think this was just an interesting story. So my aunt, my father's sister, who was much older than him, was um, as I mentioned, she didn't get a visa, and so they sent her to England to become a domestic. And but she had some health problems, and she lost her job because she was ill and she couldn't work, and she was homeless.
Mm.
And so they because she was actually too old, she turned 18, and they couldn't stay like in a children's group home, so she was homeless there. And so while my family, my father and his parents were waiting for their American visa, and they were sitting there saying, well, we're not getting our American visa. What should we do? What should we do? My my grandparents had befriended a Chinese engineering postgraduate student who had been studying engineering in Berlin, and he had rented a room for my father's aunt and uncle. He was like a boarder, and he was like 35 years old, but he really liked my aunt. She was 17, and he thought she was very attractive. And he made an offer and said, I'll get you visas to China if you let me marry your daughter. So he
Interesting.
went to England, and they begged my aunt to marry him. And she said, how? No way I'm going to marry him. He's twice my age. And, I don't love him. She actually had a boyfriend in Germany. And they said, you have to save the family, Anita. It's all up to you. And so he went to England, found her, and she married him. And that's how they had tickets and a visa to China. And then it fell through because Italy, they had the boat out of Italy to go to China. And then Italy entered the war and the whole plan completely fell through. And then she found herself married to this gentleman. His name was Ho. And she was stuck in this marriage for quite a few years with this aborted plan. So I wouldn't call it a nail biter, but I would call it like just another, sort of desperation move
Hmm.
to figure out like how this, it's hard to imagine, but if you imagine being here and figuring like you can't get out, what should we do? Who do we call? Where do we hide? Just really desperate times and asking your child to do something like that at the age of 17. Um, I think it's just sort of a tragic part of the story.
Oh my goodness. Boy, I can't imagine anybody doing anything like that. And what do you want readers to get from the book?
Yeah, I think that the way I wrote the book, it's a moving story that I think anyone can relate to because it's more than just like a hardship story, right? There's a
Hmm.
lot of redemption. It's my father trying to find out who he is. Is he German? Is he American? Is he Jewish? Will anyone accept him? He's rejected again and again. And so there's self-rejection too, but ultimately he has to accept himself. It's not just about being accepted in society. It's about self-acceptance of who he is, which is never going to be fully American. It's never going to be fully anything, but it's really about that. There's a backdrop of war, there's a backdrop of anti-Semitism, a Holocaust, but we've all most people know Holocaust stories, so there's interesting facts there, there's interesting history, but ultimately it's like reading any novel. It's all true, but it's like reading any novel where you feel like at the end you're like, oh, I read this moving story about a person who in the end, like, he makes it. He figures it out and he finds love and self-acceptance at the end, and so it's, you laugh, you cry, you feel moved, and it again, it's not just a testimonial, like it feels like a book.
Hmm. And certainly did. And where can we find your book at, Audrey?
Oh, well, everywhere. It's on Amazon, it's on Barnes and Noble, it's in your local bookstore, it's on Walmart.com. So really wherever you shop for books, you should be able to find it. And I have a copy here if anyone wants to see. There it is. I
Okay,
tried
you
to
want
match my shirt.
okay, I'll go ahead and bring it up closer for our viewers here.
Is it, see that there?
There it is. Okay. And what's your website in case anybody wants to get a hold of you?
It's audreybirnbaumauthor.com. And it has I have a really great page of a gallery of photos from that era, photos of the boat, some family photos, but some historical, really nice historical information, as well as press about the ship too, which was really interesting because a lot of newspapers wrote about it when the ship came in because it was such a amazing voyage. So yeah, the website's interesting, audreybirnbaumauthor.com. And of course, I'm on social as Audrey Birnbaum Author on Facebook and Instagram.
Okay, we'll certainly check that out. What's coming up for author Audrey Birnbaum of American Wolf from Nazi Refugee to American Spy? We'll find out just 1 minute. You listen to The Mike Wagner Show at themikewagnershow.com, powered by Sonic Web Studios, and brought to you by official sponsor of The Mike Wagner Show, international warring author Mia Molson Missing. We'll be back with author Audrey Birnbaum of American Wolf from Nazi Refugee to American Spy after this time. We're back with author Audrey Birnbaum, the Mike Wagner Show of American Wolf from Nazi Refugee to an American Spy. Very compelling book, and last story shared from what's going on to triumph and everything else. And there's a couple of things, Audrey. What else can we expect in 2024 and beyond?
Well, I'm very excited because tomorrow I'm traveling. This might not air in time, but I'm traveling to California to give a book talk at the Reagan Library. And obviously that's, it's just a great experience. They're doing a program for the rest of this month on Auschwitz. And I am writing another book. It's a novel. It's completely different. It's funny and but still about human nature because that's still where my heart is because you don't do years of medicine without knowing about families and human nature, but
Right,
it's called
exactly.
Climb.
Mhm.
And yeah, it's a great cast of characters on a trip to Croatia, um, and how they all interact when they're from all different walks of life. Um, and so yeah, so I'm working on that. I've been working on that for the past year, and and I'm doing a bunch of talks and all over the country on the book, and that's what's going on right now, keeping me busy enough.
We'll certainly check you out as well too, and keep us up to date with the latest book. And who do you consider biggest influence in your career
In my writing career, my medical career.
and anything in general?
Um, well, I do have certain favorite writers. My favorite female author, for example, is Zadie Smith. She's, in terms of like people who write currently, she's always been a role model for me, and I think I'll leave it at that.
Okay, well, those are pretty good choices. And what's the best advice you can give to anybody at this point?
Oh, first of all, tell your children about yourself. Um, they will want to know, and there's so much that, if you could write it down, even better. I think that that's really important. I'm not saying you have to write a book about yourself, but I think it's just be great to like leave that as a legacy for them. It was such a gift to me, even if I hadn't written a book, such a gift that my father wrote down all those details. And now my mother's 88. I'm going to push her to tell me more details about her life too, because hers is important also. And I'll do the same for my kids. And then if you think you want to write something, do it, because it's not going to get good the first time around. It took me, I worked on this for a few years, and it took a lot of iterations before it was something that I really wanted to, or anyone else wanted to read. And so you don't know, what you got until you start putting it on paper. So just write it,
Hmm.
and then work on it. Like a fine piece of art, you just keep erasing and redrawing and erasing and redrawing. It takes a while to hone it.
Hmm. And that's a really good piece of advice for all you authors out there. So we're with author Audrey Birnbaum of American Wolf, from Nazi Refugee to American Spy, here on the Mike Wagner Show. Audrey, very big thank you for your time. You've been absolutely fantastic. Looking forward to having you again soon. Keep us up to date. Keep in touch. Love having you back. And once again, what's your website? How do people contact you? Where can people purchase or check out your book?
Again, it's audreybirnbaumauthor.com and Audrey Birnbaum Author on Instagram and Facebook. And my book is on Amazon. It's on Barnes and Noble. It's on Walmart, and it's at your local bookstore. Uh, yeah, I hope everyone enjoys reading it. So far, the feedback has been really, really great. I'm so thrilled that people are enjoying the book.
We'll certainly do that as well. We encourage everybody to read it. Once again, Audrey, very big thank you for your time. You've been absolutely amazing. Love your stories. Looking forward to having you again soon. Keep us up to date. Keep in touch. Love having you back. Wish you all the best. And Audrey, you definitely have a great future ahead of you.
Thank you so much, Mike. Thanks for having me.